And today's broadcast is brought to you by Eclectic Horseman magazine. Stay tuned for Eclectic Conversations hosted by Emily Kitching.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me today. I'm here with Jim Hicks to visit about his exciting new book, Inquiry, Quotes and Thoughts by Jim Hicks, and also to sort of circle back and take a look at the other two books that we've done in prior years. So thanks for taking the time to be here today, Jim.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure and an honor. I feel I never take this for granted. It's a privilege.
Well, thanks. It's always good to see you. Even if I can't see you in person, to get to visit over Zoom is super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how does it feel to have our third book coming out this year?
Well, it's a little bit overwhelming. Like I was thinking about it this morning for a minute, and I thought, I'm very blessed. I say this jokingly. I have a lot of smart handlers that keep putting me in the right directions. I come up with the thoughts, and so if it wasn't for Eclectic Horseman and what you do as far as being able to publish the books, that wouldn't happen. If it wasn't for Donnette and Kim Stone for their beautiful photography, it wouldn't happen. And then there's a few other people that help with the editing and different things. So it's just, I feel very honored and privileged that I've got such a support team.
Awesome. Well, it's a fun project to be a little piece of. Tell us a little bit about your process for coming up with quotes. I mean, are they coming from your teaching or when you're riding? What's the process?
Well, I think it's been an evolution, but like when I came up with the drink of water, that originally started from the viewpoint of consolidating my thoughts into real time. So there's questions that I could ask myself as I was riding and come up with more specific answers quicker so that I could be more in the feel and the timing of the ride. And the other part of that is I started posting some of my thoughts on the internet as far as the quotes and that. And I got a sense that people really liked that and they desired it because it's something that was really easy for them. They could see a nice picture. They could take the quote and process it for a minute. And then they might be processing that quote for the next year because it's always evolving in meaning. And then when we went and did riding in the sweet light, I think we approached it a little bit more from the viewpoint of, okay, we know that there seems to be something really tangible here for people. It's a great coffee table book. It's a great meditation book. And so it's been really interesting just to see what people have opted to do with them at this point in time. And I really think that it's pretty profound because I have places like when I go and teach, it's the first thing they do in the morning is they pick a random page and then that becomes their thought for the day. And
That's cool.
It's been really fascinating if you want to get into a more of a universal energy process there for a minute. It's like for that day, that's what that particular person seems to need to work through.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's interesting. And so a lot of times I think, maybe that, well, let's say I know there's a greater power than me at work here. I just might be the mouthpiece for certain messages. And so I take this as it's a great opportunity, but I also hold it in high regard as my responsibility to visit with people and share my thoughts. And if it helps them sort something out where their horse gets the better deal, I'm super excited for the horse and I'm super excited for them. And at the end of the day, I get to be a little part of that.
Well, and I love how you're constantly evolving in what you're doing. And this year, you added the thoughts along with the quotes. And what was the motivation behind that?
Well, I think, like this last year, I did 17 clinics, and that was the biggest question from people over the last couple of years is, and then this year in particular, was what did you mean when you wrote this quote? And what I would share with them is, well, this is my thought process on that particular day and that particular time. This is what I think about it today. But what I find is that if I take one thought and be with it and work with it, each day it takes on a different meaning, and it just depends on my perspective. And so I thought, based on everybody's questions and the input there, it would be really nice for people to have the baseline of this was the quote and then this was the thought behind it that day, just to give them a starting point. And what I find really interesting for myself is I look at the quote and then I look at what my thought was. And I thought, well, that could almost be another quote.
Yep, yep.
But basically what it comes down to is it's like you say, I feel like I get the biggest gift out of this than anybody is, because I'm constantly getting to look at how I see things. How am I thinking about this? What is the horse reflecting back as far as in real time? Is this a good question for the day? Is this a good, basically just helps me understand my baselines better. And so I feel very fortunate to have all this feedback from, like I say, the horses are the first line of feedback as far as things either work or they don't work. And if they're not working, then what am I going to do differently? And so that's how I'm consistently just reframing this in my mind and looking at things, because it's real easy to say, well, it's the rider's responsibility no matter what. It's whatever happens is your fault. It's real easy to make some statements like that, but the bigger thing of it is, I think most people are already geared to think that way. What they're not geared to do is troubleshoot for themselves and ask better questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that people, when they just have settled in and they'll think about this a minute, they have the answers. They just haven't really taken the time to figure out what it is they're up to, how they're thinking about it, why does it work or why does it not work, and what adjustments could they make to clarify things for their horse.
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps consistently coming back to me time and time again. There's a lot of great information out there, and people just simply haven't really organized their thinking. And that's how I need to process this. I need to take a complicated idea and narrow it down to a thought that I can consistently review without becoming overwhelmed with a lot of busy work.
Mm-hmm. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said overwhelmed. And I think that so many times it's easy to have access to all these things that we can do and think and explore, but not have that. I mean, it's a different relationship where you're taking the responsibility for the learning yourself rather than just being told what to do. And that's a hard transition for a lot of us.
Well, and that's the thing you notice when you teach and you do clinics is the majority of people do really well when you can organize the process for them.
Mm-hmm.
You can ask them to do specific things, and in a lot of cases break it down one more time if they're confused. And that's not so unlike what I do with a horse. The more confusion there is, the more you break things down and the simpler you make it until they start catching on to the idea, okay, this is what you're asking for. What I find that is a big challenge for people is being able to do that for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like we're so geared to want to move on to the next thing that we forget to actually work on the thing that we have available to us now. And so my challenge to most people is, you know, by all means, go out there and collect all the information you can, but pick an idea and stick with it long enough to see if it's going to work for you, yes or no. And I mean, create a process of how you can verify it. How can you verify this with your horse? You know, is this something that's a realistic approach for what you and your horse are up to at this given time?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it isn't today, maybe it's a week from now, but it's just simply starting to take a little more responsibility for simplifying the thinking so that they can organize and deliver the communication or the conversation in a way that even if you don't understand it, you can track it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and it seems like just in looking at your clinic schedule, you have this wonderful mix of places that you go to multiple times in the year where you've got some consistency with your students, and then also brand new places. So that must be, just as a teacher, a wonderful opportunity to develop your teaching relationship with people that you've seen before, and then new people. I imagine that's a fun place to be.
Yeah, and I mean, I've learned to appreciate the different people that I have had the ability to work with and had the honor to work with, because like once again, this is a privilege to be able to go out and share a little piece of knowledge with people, and if it helps them feel more confident or their horses feel more confident, I feel like that's a really that's part of why I do this, because I really believe if the human can put their mind around this in a sensible way, that the horses do get a better deal. You know, and where I see horses suffer sometimes is we'll get a catchphrase or something out there that, you know, like make the right thing easy or the wrong thing difficult. And you'll hear, like, I know my observation of Ray and his clinics over the years, that people would misquote him and say, make the right thing easy and the wrong thing hard.
Mm.
And I know that was super frustrating for him based on his response to that, because his comment was, I never said hard. I says, make the right thing easy and the wrong thing difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so then you get in front of people and they go, well, what does that mean? And my one of the analogies I really like to use, because human nature is we think we need to get a bigger club to send a more powerful message. We need to be more poignant or whatever the deal may be. But I say, look at it like this. If you ever sat at a picnic table and had a fly start buzzing around your head and you're just about slapping yourself silly because this fly is aggravating you to no end. And they go, well, yeah. And I said, now when the fly goes away, you go, thank goodness it left. And they go, well, yeah. I says, there's the relief. I said, so the fly physically cannot hurt you, but just simply by how it's moving around you, it can make it inconvenient or almost impossible for you to just stand there and feel comfortable in your own skin until it leaves. And so that's one of the analogies I like to use for people, is think of it that way, because then it takes this concept of force and make and, you know, so a lot of the folks that I teach are smaller ladies, and so they go, well, you're a big guy, you know, I can't be powerful like you. And I'm like, it has nothing to do with physical strength. It has everything to do with mental muscle and your ability to organize that mental muscle such that you can start to influence your horse to look for a different idea if the one that they're presenting is not serving you. And so, I mean, just little things like that. And that's where I've had to just learn. I've had to teach myself how to learn and how to process things because I'm dyslexic. And so I don't process information the same way that, let's just say, your conventional education system would present it. And so I really never enjoyed my education or learning until I didn't have to go to school, number one. And then I actually had to teach myself how I needed to learn. And that's where I feel like I've developed a lot of empathy and compassion for the horse over the years, because there's what their nature tells them to do based on being a prey animal, and we're predators. And basically, we walk in the room and we're speaking English and we think they should understand it, and we might as well be speaking foreign language from their perspective. And so that's where I find it really interesting to observe people. And the more, let's just say, the more brilliant somebody is, the more they hold themselves hostage between their ears, because you'll see them work twice as hard as anybody else, but what's missing is feel.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're too busy thinking about the miracle versus feeling the staircase that leads to the miracle.
Mm. Ooh, that's something to think about. I got to process that. That's great. Do you when you're talking about your learning challenges giving you empathy for the horse, do you feel like when you're teaching folks, are there ways that you maybe make them aware of things that they can have more empathy with their horse, maybe challenges in their past or different situations that can sort of, because so much of sort of that passion for good horsemanship, it comes from a place that's pretty deep for a lot of people, and that I'm always interested in how that spark gets ignited.
Well, it's interesting. So I just got back from Florida, and this conversation with feel and timing and having your reins connect to the feet came up in one of the rides in particular. And I found that I explained it, and then I could see that it still wasn't connecting, because they were still mentally working, attempting to process it from logic.
Mm-hmm.
They were making it more complicated than it was. And so I said, can we do a little experiment? And they said, yeah. And so what I did is I found two lead ropes, and I had them put one around each foot. And I said, now why don't you walk? So you're going to be the feet and I'm going to be the rein. And so I said, right. So I started talking about it. I said, so in the beginning, I said, go ahead and walk off. And then I just let my hand stop, and they ran into it and about tripped. Well, it didn't take but a couple times of doing that, and then pretty quick you could see them getting real tentative about how much they started feeling back. How much can I take this foot? And then when I got them to start considering that, then I started offering a feel that was saying slow the foot down, but let me redirect it as well. Well, what I found is that in about 2 minutes, I got them to start feeling it versus thinking it, because they were able to translate it in their body. They could feel what it felt like in their body to have a rein slow a foot down, or a rein to redirect, or a rein that just says, no, you don't go there. like a lot of people don't realize that their hands are a source of concern. And so they think, well, my horses won't go to my hand or won't feel for my hand. And my point is that's just the contrary. They're so aware of your hand that with some folks, just the way they reach for the rein, that just got the horse backed off because they don't realize how much energy they're putting through their feel to that horse's mouth. And so that was a really interesting experiment. And I think that that's the part of teaching that I never get bored of is let's just say the basics are the basics.
Mm-hmm.
But just like to me, I was working with a horse. Okay, we're having a momentary disconnect in communication. So how do we break this back down and start getting a conversation in place to where we can start relating to one another through feel? And so what that what that inspires in me is that when you think that you know something inside and out, or that something is a specific way, that might be the time to pause and just see, is there another way that I could look at this that would create clarity quicker than just doing what we normally do? And so that's where I get really creative when I teach. And each person is like a horse. If you watch how they move and if you listen to what they say, or a lot of times it's what they're not saying that's more important. And you start to key in on, ask questions around that, then you actually figure out where the work needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So how I would relate that is this is going way back in my memory banks, but I remember that Tom made a comment to somebody. They says, well, I'll go work on this. And he says, well, don't work on it too hard. And I think that my experience and interpretation, with Tom is that he didn't have a fixed way of getting anything done. Everything was an experiment for him. Maybe there was certain themes that he would work with, but I saw him, every horse and rider were it was like a beginner's mind. And this is another, okay, what are we going to create here?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would be my interpretation of what I saw and how I felt. But what that did is it created a learning space. And when there's a learning space, then there's a desire to actually make a mistake or two because it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing I feel. I used to ride a lot of horses that, let's just say, were good soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't mine, but they were horses that I was exposed to. And they were real quick to say, yes, sir, no, sir. But what I learned is those horses operate out of fear. They're moving out of survival. They're getting busy to stay out of trouble. Well, if you think about that, people are pretty consistent with that idea. There's people that move out of fear. And so they get busy, they get talkative, whatever their little winning formulas are. And that's how they've learned to navigate to stay out of trouble. Well, that's okay. But for me, where it gets really intriguing with the horse or with the human is when you can start creating an environment for them to be okay making the mistake. Because in being so afraid to make a mistake, they make the mistake and they repeatedly make it. But when you can relieve that anxiety, then they start let's just say the committee in their head calms down and quits talking, and then they go, well, you know, instead of going, well, these guys are judging me. If I make a mistake, they all think I'm a bad horseman, whatever the story is. Versus going, you know what? This seems to be a safe environment. I'm willing to step into the unknown here a little bit. And these folks over here are in the same boat that I am. And that would be the environment I like to create for my horses, and I like to create that for people. And I find for my teaching style and how I need to learn, that's super powerful.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna just keep saying this over and over again, that even though we're very different in nature as far as predator-prey concept, we have one thing in common with the horse, and the horse has one thing in common with us. And that number one thing is self-preservation. And when we can remove the need to self-preserve, then the education begins.
Ooh, I feel that. I can feel that, Jim. Oof. Yeah.
And so I'm not saying I got this figured out by any means, but what I'm saying is that I keep these quotes. Like a good example with say less more often. A lot of times people go, well, what do you mean by that? And I'm going, well, instead of that one big pull, how about the pre-signal to the signal? Or maybe think of it in terms, there's a pre-signal to the pre-signal to the pre-signal, so that you give your horse a little more information to work with through feel, so that you can actually get the message to them on when it needs to be there and on time, or closer to being on time. And the other way that I approach people with that is I just say, if you think about it, there's the time that I say it, there's the time that you hear it, and then you've got to process it, and then you've got to send it through your body to the horse's body back to their mind. And I said, if you just think of that as like a 5-second delay, and that is how much preparation needs to happen before the message gets delivered. And so with just helping people become a little more aware of that, it's really been fascinating to see how unaware they are of their own energy, and how it positively or negatively affects the horse depending on how they reach for a rein, how they use their leg. One of my favorite quotes that's in the book is, when you reach for your horse, they have one of two choices. They can brace for impact, or they can soften and feel back to you and get ready for what we're going to do next. And that's how I would like to think that I present myself to my horse consistently. But because I'm human, I fail too sometimes, but I recognize it. A little preparation would have gone a long ways right in this moment. Because just telling on myself a little bit more is what I've learned is, the more capable you are and the more ability you have and the more understanding you have, that's a place that you have to be super careful, because when you start taking that for granted, then you start becoming greedy or not offering the necessary feel that empowers your horse's confidence and the relaxation. So that's where I really want to check in with myself at times, because it's like, yeah, don't take this for granted. Feel comes and it goes, and the other part of that is how do you develop good feel through lots of bad feel?
Well, and that's the part that's so incredibly I mean, addictive about it is that it is a constant process of refinement and figuring things out. And it's, it's the opposite of daunting. I mean, it's exciting that it's always this thing that we can make improvements on, I feel like.
Well, this is what I find fascinating. So in the horse world, you meet lots of people. You meet people that, they have $2 in their pocket. They're gonna spend it on their horse and they'll go hungry because the horse offers them something that they couldn't get anywhere else. And then you've got millionaires that fly in on their private jets and they want to come hang out with you, and they want to be part of the conversation because it's something their money can't buy. Mm-hmm. And so I find that it works on both extremes, but it all comes back to the horse. And the horse tells us exactly where we're at any given time. And if we want real shift and change, we have to work that through because we cannot go buy another gimmick or another gadget, or we have to do the work. Mm-hmm. And so I tell people, my books aren't for everybody. This is their picture books. You can look at the picture and you can take the quote. But they're not for everybody because it's not a paint by the number deal. Mm-hmm. Because you hear these words out there, catchphrases, systems, methods, whatever the terminology is. Well, it's fine to have structure. But when the structure overrides being able to adjust in the moment, for me, that becomes a problem and that becomes very limiting. And what I mean by that is if I can send the message to my horse one time with clarity, move them forward with a month's worth of riding just in that one moment, that's a powerful moment. But it's what that tells me is the horse was able to receive. Let's just say that I was part of creating the environment for that moment to happen. Versus the other moment is human nature is we're geared to no pain, no gain. Pick it up, set it down one more time. And the more times you pick it up and set it down, you're going to perfect it. Well, so a lot of times what I'll see people do is the first, second, or third time, maybe even the fourth time they were right on, the horse got it. And then 10,000 times later, the horse is checked out, they're gone because it's like, well, I'm not sure what you want. We're just doing busy work right now. We're just throwing sand around the sandbox. And that's where I really appreciate the power of the moment and the power of good feeling timing. Mm-hmm. And I did a little experiment. I read a lot of things, and I did an experiment so what I read was they were talking about training the horse for 4 minutes and a pause for 4 minutes, and they put some sort of formula to the improvement in the horse's learning. And so let's just say I'm not going to quote exact numbers because I don't remember, but let's just say it was like a 30% improvement. And I don't know how they figured that out, but so then they went, okay, we took the same project and we went 2 minutes and 2 minutes. And then when they got done with that, they had figured that it had improved the horse's learning curve by like 70%. So I'm real curious, and so I find myself out here. I'm doing this little experiment because I want to, with my own horse, because I want to just see, what is the horse telling me with this? And you know what I learned more than anything out of that is it was real easy for me to ride my horse for 2 minutes, but that 2-minute pause, I might as well have been like trying to hold a house on top of my head. Catching myself after about 10 seconds, 15 seconds. You should be doing something.
Mm-hmm.
So as patient or as allowing as I thought I was about that, what I found is that exercise was more valuable for me,
Mm-hmm.
probably than it was for my horse. Now, I'm not saying my horse didn't get some value out of that, but that's what I learned from that experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think um, most of the good horsemen that I know, they're not really impressed with what they know. They're curious about what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was me being curious about, okay, I'm not sure about this, but what it came back to is it comes back to this consistent thought that goes back to Tom and Ray, and is we're the ones that need to adjust.
Mm-hmm.
And I think anymore it's really tricky because, like I say, for me, I'll just speak for me. For me, the smarter I get, the more careful I need to be, because I never want to get to the spot where I just assume that I got it figured out, and that because I've done this and 200 horses have proven to me that it works. I never want to lose sight that there might be a better way to do it. Yeah, I mean, I think search is a good word. I mean, we use that quite often with our horses. Can we get them to search? Can we get them to look for our ideas? And now to the counterbalance to this, so I've just talked about the concern I would have about being so structured in my thinking that I was so mindful that I lost my feel. The other side of that is there's people that are really touchy feely. They see all the miracles and the possibilities, and they see the world from they're very creative, and so from that standpoint, there's where a little bit of structure that creativity is going to be super valuable. And so I like the word equilibrium, because what equilibrium means is bringing two opposing forces to a balance point. And so I look at the structure and the creativity and I go, okay, here's both extremes, but now how do we find the equilibrium between the two so that one can serve the other or complement the other in a way that the horse starts to experience the best that we have to offer.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I want to circle back and ask you a little bit about the photographs in the book, because that is such a huge component. And we've talked about the importance of the specific language. Talk a little bit about how you feel about the imagery and what that brings to not just the beauty of the book itself, but the educational aspect.
Well, so I'm going to circle back to the first one I did for just a second. So when I started doing that, I said it was a little bit of a social experiment to just get a feel for what seemed to resonate for people. So how that worked for me originally is I would write a quote, and then I'd go through these different photographs that I had, and I would find one that I felt the quote inside of. And that was originally my thought process with that. And I believe that it still is. But I would say I trust it a little more now. So I'm a little more comfortable with that process because let's just say if I was to just cut to the chase here for a minute, I mean, there's the tricky part of it is when you put yourself in front of the public, a picture paints the picture puts texture to the words. And so then you go, all right, so here's the words. Does the picture bring the words to life or the photograph?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then the thought crossed my mind of, well, I'm in the majority of these photographs. And the reason being is that I have come to the conclusion for myself is like that, just I can continually create these different feels and these different horses. And so it's not, for me, it's not an ego thing, but it's just keep saying, you know, this stuff works. And it's creating texture, and it's saying, I believe, you know, these are the words that I'm speaking, and these are the horses that I'm riding, and this is the picture that we're creating as a team.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that it's a little bit of all that combined. But what I really, coming back to I jokingly say this, all my handlers, I really rely on, as far as the photographs, I rely on Donnette's eye, and I rely on Kim's eye, and I rely on their perspective of what they saw or how they felt about that particular photograph in the moment. Like there's things that they can see that I can't see, like that was an interesting moment. And then when I actually pause and I look at their perspective, I'm like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say I'm a little more confident in the sense of I'm allowing my creativity to expand, and how I'm doing that is I'm allowing other people's crew to contribute to me creatively and say, you know, here's another perspective on this. And then I can look and go, okay, here's the thoughts, here's the quote, here's the picture. Is it all cohesive?
Mm-hmm.
And so to be honest with you, I think it's evolved into something a lot more spectacular than what I originally had in mind, simply because I'm open to seeing it from more angles.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, even I really value your opinion about certain things, and I'm like, if Emily contributes something to me, my ears are perked up and my ears are open, and I'm like, I need to turn loose to other people. That'd be a good word.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the perfect word. Well, and it's like how we started this conversation when you're talking about having the horse feel comfortable enough to not feel like they have to have that self-preservation. I mean, that's that sort of collaborative creative process and putting a book together. It's in the same vein.
Yeah. And then just coming back to learning styles for a minute. So let's just say when you have a different way that you learn than the majority of the people, it has taken me a lifetime not to hear constructive input as criticism. And so that's where it's really been fun for me for my own evolution, is just like the horse, I'm able to turn loose to this concept and idea, and I'm able to trust the people sitting on the fence.
Mm-hmm.
Like I might be in here and the focus might be here, and I might be a little bit uncertain about what the next step is. But instead of hearing it as a judgment or a criticism or this is a right or wrong, this is a place that we can grow and evolve. And that's like when we do demonstrations with these, like the colt startings and that's what I would like to see it come back to for me is this is an environment where you can take a horse that really doesn't know anything and they can come into this environment and before they're done feel confident and more in the human and not just because they've been shuttled through the subway, but they can look over here and go, you know what, you were a threat 20 minutes ago, but now you're not such a concern because whether you're sitting on the fence or whether you're over here, I mean, that's what we have to do in real life and navigate. And so that would be where I would like to see it come back to a little bit more of an allowing. Allow the time and the space for these concepts to settle in and where the horse can become comfortable, find relief inside of discomfort. And I think, we all run the risk of meaning well, but overdoing it. And so that's where that's where I really relate to my own learning and how do I need to let down. And one of the other things I was sharing quite a bit here recently is I'd rather have my horse or have the person understand one thing and be comfortable with it and confident than have 15 things that are confusing and chaotic. And when there's confusion and chaos, there's always that underlying uncertainty of I can trust it, no, I can't. I can trust it, no, I can't. And so that's where I feel like that there's a saying that I really like, and the military uses it as slow as smooth, smooth as fast. So I'm always looking at that, and I'm coming back to when I want to move fast. First question I go is, does the horse have the tools? Second question is second line of thought is if they don't, I slow down and make sure they have the tools. If the answer is they have the tools, then I've done my homework. I'm okay letting things be a little uncertain, some speed, so that can become the new comfort. So I don't know. I'm taking this all over the place here, but
yeah, no, it's great. Well, and I love that you picked the knowing one thing well versus 10 things, because when I was laying the book out, like that was the one that like jumped out to me in big neon. Like, oh, that's a good takeaway for me, because I'm guilty of that. Sort of moving on before things are super clear. So that was good for me to read.
Yeah, and I mean, we do it with ourselves all the time. And then we wonder why our horses get confused. And like you say, everybody means well. And like, there's nothing that I'm saying here that I'm not guilty of hundreds of times. But I just every time I become aware that I'm doing something, I just keep resetting the bar and saying, okay, back up, go forward.
Yeah. Well, I have a feeling we could visit most of the day, Jim, but I'm sure you have other things that you need to do. Is there anything else that we need to touch on before we send this out to folks and get the word out about the brand new book?
No, I'm just super excited about this new book. I think I think each one gets a little better. I think this one's more well-rounded. It gives you a 360-degree view. There's a couple little stories in there as well. I think that those are helpful for people because they like to feel like they're relatable. So I'm real excited about that, but I'm really excited for the biggest thing I'm excited about is not so much what I think about it, but I'm really excited to hear what other people think about it. And I just like to say, I think it's a great Christmas present. If somebody would like to stick it under the tree for somebody, they make great coffee table books. Say a lot of people use them for meditation books. for me, I consistently ask myself these questions when I ride. And so, I mean, that would be the big thing is just what, if people are feeling like they want to purchase them for Christmas, come to the Eclectic Horseman and get them through your website and go from there.
Perfect. Well, I'll put the link down below, and folks can check out the new title and the other titles as well, and get them in time for the holidays.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right. Thanks for taking the time. We'll see you on down the road.